Hello, my name is Sam Post with PhenomWell. Our show today is about how racism has been fully expressed and institutionalized in our marijuana laws. And our guest today is Lee Little from Charlotte, North Carolina. Lee is a political consultant who advocates for various public policy issues and candidates, including federal legalization of cannabis. He spent time in Florida organizing door-to-door canvases to promote Florida cannabis legalization. Lee, welcome.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Sam.
So Florida actually does have legal medical
Yeah,
marijuana now,
yes, they
right?
do. Yeah, their law is very restrictive. I remember prior to them legalizing medical marijuana, they actually well, it took them a minute to do it, but the way that they did it, their law is very restrictive as to who can participate in producing cannabis. So I mean, they had some ridiculous policies that said, you had to be in business in an agricultural concern for 20 years to be even authorized to grow cannabis. And so they do have legal cannabis, but it's most of the concerns are large concerns, large corporate concerns, and there's no room in their legislation for people like myself or people who dream of being a distributor or owning a dispensary or something of that nature.
I got it. So it's sort of a corporate enterprise down there in Florida, not exactly what might be
Yes.
called for in this situation. I'm going to just tell you a little story about how I got interested in this topic because it's not like, we have a store, but it's not like it was a political thing when I started the store. I was just like starting a store. And then now I've gotten kind of interested in this and other political aspects of cannabis. I had a guy come in the store, and I'm a retired teacher. So this kid came in there and he bought some CBD gummies for his 10-year-old child. And he was going to cut them in little quarters, 10 milligram gummies, cut them in quarters. So he's giving his child 2.5 milligrams of CBD for his attention deficit. And he said it works, for him. He likes it. He prefers that better than, say, Ritalin or other prescription meds. And we started talking. It turns out he was a student of mine, and he's now in his 40s. So, I didn't
Okay.
recognize him since he was 12, right? And we started talking, and he's a truck driver, and kind of obviously loves his son. He was there shopping for his son, and he's married and has children. And we got to talking, and he said he's a black guy, and he said that he was going to play football. He got a full scholarship to the University of Georgia to play football. And I was like, well, you must have been pretty good in football. And he
Mm.
was. He said, yeah, I was really good. And then he got stopped and busted for marijuana possession the summer before he went to college for his freshman year. And he said after that he couldn't go to Georgia or anywhere else. And he never went to college. He's been working his whole life, but he
Mm.
couldn't. He said it kind of, I don't want to say it ruined his life because he sounds like he's had a great life, but he said that. He says it kind of ruined my life. And that got me thinking. That was not something
Okay.
I was really aware of. I mean, I said it. I would talk about it like it's not fair. Like I live over here right beside a college, and they never bust anybody there. And there's a neighborhood a few blocks away that's all black, and you see cop blue lights over there all the time, and they're doing the exact same thing in both those two places. So I've said stuff like that, but I've never really had anybody talk about it that way. And and then
Mhm.
and then I've we had an employee who said, there has to be some, like, black people have to be let in on the business side of this too. I got kind of confronted by that. But like, well, really? I mean, you're just working here. I mean, I'm the owner, right? I don't want to give her my store because of unfairness. stuff like that. But I just wasn't real aware. And that's why I wanted to do
Hmm.
this interview, Lee. And because it sounds like you've thought about this a lot more than I have.
Well, yes, I have, and I've seen people who have been disproportionately sanctioned because of cannabis. I call it cannabis prohibition. So yes, this is something that I've thought about and discussed with on a number of different levels and in different states. So.
Well, how did you get interested in this? I mean, we we know each other from courses we've taken together. We both work with Landmark worldwide and take some of their classes, so we've been in their courses together. And I didn't know you were interested in this at all until you were talking about it one day, and then I realized you know a lot about this. What? So,
Well, yes. My dad was a school teacher like yourself, but he taught agriculture, horticulture, and botany and forestry at the local high school. So I've been, I call myself a botanist, but I don't have a degree in that. But I know it. I have learned how to grow just about anything, and I became interested in it because I like the plant. I'm not. I don't imbibe cannabis now. I mean, it's even though we have legalization, companies still test you for it, and in order to have a decent job, you got to be clean. But I just, you know, when you look at from a religious standpoint, I guess you could say, in Genesis it talks about how all the plants were put here for for medicine and for food, and there is nothing in cannabis that is addictive, and quite often it's the it and or harmful. And so it's not like other Schedule 3 drugs, and that cocaine and heroin and all those other drugs are very addictive and can be very harmful. And so cannabis is not like that, and it hasn't. I know George Washington had the rope contract for the U.S. Navy, and they didn't have, synthetic fibers back then to make rope. So most of the rope was made from hemp. And so he had grew thousands of acres of we call it hemp, but it's basically marijuana. And so that, and our Constitution, all of the great documents that, the Bill of Rights, all of those documents are made from paper, hemp paper. And so there's, it's been a part of our culture for a long time. And the reason that they have prohibited it or made it illegal is so some company can make money making synthetic fibers. So that's, that's I grew up farming or and that type of thing, and so that's how I became interested in the plant. And back then, I smoked a little bit. I was a college athlete as well, and I played college baseball, so I didn't party a whole lot and that type of thing.
so cannabis became illegal in the 30s, correct? Is
Yes,
and it was DuPont made nylon, right? They invented that polyester nylon, so they needed to corner the market. Basically, is that pretty much how it came about?
pretty much so. And then uh, that's part of it. Another aspect of it was because we had people coming from south of the border, and they smoked marijuana, so law enforcement wanted to, they wanted to quell them from coming over and doing the things that they like to do. I mean, that's not the only reason. Do the story about DuPont, certainly that's true, but I mean, when you go back to the 30s and 40s, I mean, cannabis was regularly consumed in black and brown neighborhoods and people of different cultures, and that was a way, make prohibiting it or making it illegal was a way to negatively affect those communities that smoked marijuana back then.
But the bottom line of it is though that white people and black people smoke marijuana. Well, now it's legal in 36 states, but in going back just a few years, they equally they smoke the same amount per capita equally, but yet the arrests are. I mean, I've read 5 times among African Americans. Is that? I mean, do you know the stats on that one?
I don't know all of the stats, but I do know that black and brown people are disproportionately arrested for cannabis more than anyone else. And I don't think it has nothing to do really with who's smoking it. I mean, that's just straight out prejudice there, I think. Prejudice in law enforcement, probable cause to search homes and vehicles and that type of thing. So I think the heart of the matter is the heart of the people who are working in law enforcement and the businesses that that make money off cannabis being illegal. That's why it's illegal.
Mm. Yeah, it's. I just looked at it here. It's 4 times. So the usage is roughly the same for black and white, but black people are 4 times more likely to be arrested. It,
That's true, and that has nothing to do with cannabis. That's the hearts of the people that are doing it. They unfortunately in this country we experience racism and prejudice in a lot of different ways, and the prohibition of marijuana was a way that they could readily lock people up, and they call it the prison industrial complex for a reason. I mean, they have people that are working for $2 a day in prison, some very skilled workers. I didn't go into that in my background, but when I first moved back here from Florida, I worked as a correction officer, and that's one of the only jobs that I've ever hated. And and disproportionately, when you look at people's records who are there are a lot of people in jail for small amounts of cannabis. And when I say small amounts, I mean less than a pound of cannabis. So it's that's the society we live in, and we got to work on that. As a black community, we can't do that by ourselves. It takes us all to change what's going on legally.
that seems almost absurd now to think people would get years in prison for
Yeah.
less than a pound when
Mhm.
now, well, 36 states have medical or recreational. But there was a interesting, this poll came out Friday, I believe. Elon College did a poll in North Carolina, and
Mhm.
according to that, 54% favor legalization of recreational cannabis, and 34 oppose it. 34% in North Carolina, and for medical, 67% favor it, and 20% oppose it. So, with 36
Mhm.
states being legal, North Carolina will probably be the last, right?
Unfortunately.
Just, I mean, we were the last with, back with prohibition when that ended,
Mhm.
and with the lottery. Like they let Virginia and South Carolina go first, and then when money starts to leave the state, then North Carolina seems to come around.
Yes.
And but it does seem absurd with that kind of popularity that there's still people in prison now, right?
Yeah.
So what are the remedies for that? I mean, you say Florida did not fix that situation.
Well, no, well, then they don't arrest people for small amounts of cannabis, and I think in part of their legislation, if you get caught with a quarter ounce or an ounce or something like that, you're gonna be sanctioned by the court, but they're not gonna lock you up for that. As far as remedies for that, I mean, there's got to be fairness. You know, I I am a member of the Marijuana Business Journal. I receive it every quarter. And the reason that I do that, I receive it, is because I have a business plan. And, someday I've got 26 acres in Anson County. And my hope is that someday that I would be able to do a couple of greenhouses to make money in what is an emerging market. It's like the gold rush out here. But when you look at the cannabis industry, less than 1% of people that are making money on cannabis or own greenhouses or dispensaries or food concerns, less than 1% of those people are African Americans. And we have to fix that. We've been sanctioned for disproportionately. Now all of a sudden that it's legal, and we don't have the means to participate in what is certainly going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry once they take it off the Schedule 3. Once the government finally takes cannabis out of the Schedule 3 drug list. So it's again, that's the hearts of people, and and prejudice and racism, and that's the bottom line basically. But we need to fix it. California's done something to attempt to do that. I think in California, if you are, well, first of all, in most states, you can't participate if you have a record. If you've been arrested, if you've been sanctioned by the judicial system or the justice system, and you have a felony record of some sort because of cannabis, then you can't participate or you can't be a business owner. And so that cuts out a whole lot of people when you look at the disparity of people who have been convicted of cannabis offenses. And I was saying that California, now what California has done is they people who serve time in California because of cannabis, they I think they make it such that they can participate in the system by owning one greenhouse. And I think the production value after taxes and production costs, I think the equivalent of between 150 and $200,000 in profit, one greenhouse in California. So they're making amends, or they're attempting to make amends, but that hasn't spread across the country like like the industry has spread. So I'm looking forward. I hope they do something like that nationwide.
Somebody told me one time Illinois had the model program. Yeah, do you know anything about it? I should have looked it up before we had this conversation, but
I have heard that they have very liberal. They have a very liberal law in Illinois with regard to cannabis, and so does New Jersey. But what New Jersey, it's a money thing, of course. Any northeastern cities, you have to have the money. But I mean, if you have the money, but New Jersey has limited the number of people that can grow, so it's not open to everyone. And I think the only way to really make it fair is to let everybody participate. Everybody that has the means to get a production facility up and going, or a dispensary of some sort. I mean, we should have the opportunity to do that, and it's just not like that right now. And part of that is cost prohibitive to get started. Then once you get started, I mean, you still can't have a regular banking account. Still a cash business, which is crazy.
mm,
Uh, and that creates a lot of other costs. If you can't keep, you're making $300,000 in one day selling legal medical marijuana, then what do you do with the cash? Because you can't put it in the bank because the federally is still a Schedule 3 drug, and so they don't allow that, or Schedule 1, I think. I've been saying Schedule 3, but I think it's still on the Schedule 1 list. Either way, it's still illegal and it's still a serious felony. And so the government just hasn't caught up to where the industry is. And the sooner they do that, the better it'll be for all of us.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah, they're
sense?
kind of, yeah, it does. I applied for the PPP loan for our
Hmm.
business, and I got a letter today saying we got the first round, and it helped us a lot because business had gone down to nothing there for a while. And then this one, they said no, it's a prohibited industry, so we got
Yeah.
declined this time. I got that email this morning, and that's probably part of the same thing with the banking. I've had to change just with hemp and CBD. We've had to change banks, and change processors and getting banned from Facebook and all that kind of stuff.
Like, yeah, that's ridiculous. There are people out there that are serious proponents of it, and I think the in the state legislature, Kelly Alexander. I'm going to try to connect you guys. I think he's been a proponent, for legalized marijuana for a long time, and he's tried to introduce bills, but it just goes nowhere here. People are very conservative.
Well, I looked up Jerry Nadler's bill, and I think it
Hmm.
passed in the last session. And I don't really know how Congress works, but I think now they have to start over and vote again, right? It did pass, but then now don't they have to reintroduce it again with the new Congress?
Yeah, well, yes, they will have to reintroduce it. I mean, the Senate has changed hands, and in order for something to become a law, well, you're a school teacher, it has to be passed by the Senate and the House, and the president has to sign it, and it has to be ratified in 2/3 of the states. So that's a steep climb there, but I mean, it should be done.
Well, not well. I mean, it passed the House, and I
Mm.
assume they're gonna. It's the same bill. They're gonna reintroduce it. But here's what he said. He had four main points. One, that it provides much needed relief to the communities that have been ravaged by the oppressive enforcement of marijuana prohibition. Two, removes marijuana from Controlled Substances Act, which
Yeah.
decriminalizes it at the federal level, thereby enables states to set their own policies.
Hmm.
And that will also pave the way for more scientific research, which has also been prohibited until a few years ago, and medical research. So
Yes.
the other thing is it allows the existing state marijuana industry to access, like what you were saying, financial services, banks, and enjoy the same tax treatment available to other legal businesses.
Hmm.
And then four, gives veterans more readily available access to medical marijuana by no longer having VA doctors risk federal prosecution for filling out state legal medical recommendations. So a VA doctor in California can get in trouble by prescribing marijuana to one of his patients, apparently.
Yes, they're and I am a veteran also. I served in the submarine navy, and I was in the hospital corps, and I was nationally registered EMT when I was in the navy. But yes, I mean the VA is, even though cannabis probably would help a lot of veterans because of its legal standing in the U.S., they won't do it. They just won't. And that's unfortunate. I hope Nadler's bill goes through, and that changes so that we can be a better nation. If you look at what was it, the state of California that gave money back to taxpayers because the cannabis industry created so much revenue in the state. I mean, that's fantastic. It's to get money back.
Yeah, I think Colorado did that.
Yes, it was Colorado.
Colorado did that.
Yeah,
They,
it
they
was.
had a surplus, so they had to give money back to the taxpayers. So
It's the new gold rush. So I mean, why wouldn't you want to help your people? You know.
sure. So let's go to a break now, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about North Carolina and cannabis.
All right.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
So if If that bill were to pass Congress again, it would probably pass the House again.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Senate, you never know. Kamala Harris has already said, she said during the debate, she wants to legalize cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
So then, of course, it's a split Senate, but then it's not quite a party thing on a federal level like it is in North Carolina. In North Carolina, it's pretty much party line vote,
Yes.
and we've got a fairly Republican General Assembly in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the only group in this poll that's against legalization are people over the age of 65 because they're still thinking about the war on drugs from Reagan and Nixon,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And even I know some people in my family still think it's bad. It's and they're the older people in my family, right?
Yes.
So, but under 65 it's pretty much it's very popular. So it's possible the Senate could pass that. So then that would leave North Carolina. And do you know anything about what North Carolina would do if they could? We can't put it on there's no referendum. You can't have a ballot initiative in North Carolina from citizens signing a petition. They have to do it in Raleigh. The General Assembly has to do it. So let's just imagine that they did. What do you think it should look like?
Well, I think that it should be done. I don't think that there should be the type of restrictions that Florida has. I think it's they conservatives or Republicans talk about free market economics and everything, and I think that everybody that has the means to raise the money to build the facility to start the business should be capable of doing that. These crazy restrictions that other states have put on getting into the business, they shouldn't do that. I mean, they should give everybody should have an opportunity to prosper with the cannabis industry. And there lies the rub. They again, it's about the hearts of men and women in the state. Some people just they don't want black and brown people to have opportunities to enrich themselves and create wealth for their families. I don't know why. I'm of the philosophy that a rising tide lifts all boats. So I mean, if your poorest people are rich or have wealth, then they're able to buy your goods and services if you're in some other industry. So it's a win-win, really, financially, for us to legalize. I think so first of all, they shouldn't put too many restrictions on it. If you have the means, you should have the opportunity to start the business, and they should regulate it like any other business. And the third thing is they shouldn't let North and South Carolina are big tobacco concerns, and a lot of people are concerned that that what they would do cannabis like they do cigarettes, and they would have a monopoly on all of the cannabis, and that would be devastating. I mean, help your people out, help your citizens, allow them to be enriched. Some people, and not everybody would want to start a business. I mean, not everybody's like you and I, Sam. I've got a business plan for craft cannabis cultivation facility that I would love to implement to create clean, good cannabis for all the citizens. And I shouldn't be restricted because I haven't been in business for 20 years or some other ridiculous concern that they've placed on in Florida and other states. So those are the three major things. And they should do like California. People that they've once they do legalize, they should help people that they locked up for years for cannabis. They should be some type of reparation for them to either be in the business or complete expungement or exoneration. They should do something to help people to get their lives back. So those are my major things that I would want to see. I would want, all barriers. I mean, certainly it costs money to do things, but the barriers don't have to be so ridiculous that an average person like myself or you or anybody else who wants to grow or start a dispensary or develop a food brand, that's a cannabis based food brand, they should be able to do that with as little restrictions as possible. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, you're making sense. It actually, what doesn't make sense is that somebody who's, I mean, I could see if you have, like a criminal who had that on their record and other stuff. But if that's the only thing a
Mhm.
person spent, served time for, and then to prohibit them from being in that business makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree.
They might have been pretty good. Yeah, yeah. I mean, what makes no sense is for someone who spent time in prison for selling marijuana or possession of marijuana not to be allowed in that business.
Hmm. I agree.
If they might be pretty good business people, but you're saying some of these laws. I don't know what it's like in North Carolina. Like, have you looked into growing hemp? You don't have to. Do you have to be an existing farmer growing other something else already? Is that the way it works? Or
I have looked into hemp and growing hemp, and you can. I think the University of the North Carolina State University has a program where you can go take the class and you can qualify to be a hemp grower. I don't know exactly what the costs are, what it takes to get into the program and everything, but there are ways that you can do it. I was researching it a couple of months ago, but I didn't think that I had enough land to really follow through with it, and then the land that I own is treed and would have to be developed. But there is a way that you can go take the class, get the license, and grow hemp in North Carolina, and it's not that restrictive from what I read back then.
but it takes some money to do it, right? I mean, to grow because you have to. If you were to grow it in a greenhouse and cure it under the right temperatures and everything, the whole process it takes some startup money. Any business does, right?
Yes, the average. I'm not exactly sure, but one greenhouse could cost as much as $250,000, um, and that's because these facilities, well, now are pretty high tech. You have the normal. It's a normal greenhouse, but you also have different lighting and air filtration and water. Water. You can't. I guess you can. It grows out wild, but and you can have. But in order to give the plant the optimum conditions that it needs, you have to have some things in place. Like I mentioned, air filtration, and you have to have clean water, or water that's not too fluorinated to grow the best cannabis. And so, yes, that's very expensive.
So the way to do reparations is to make loans available for African Americans to start up businesses in this field, and I mean co-ops or individuals or because most people are going to need a loan to do that, right? I guess there are only the big money bags people are going to be able to start something like that without a loan,
Yeah, you're
and
right.
I mean so what that's to me that sounds like an obvious thing that needs to be looked at, right? I mean, I know I've started businesses with loan and I've gotten loans and they've been very small loans and very small
Mhm.
businesses. But something like that, you know, that's can take some capital,
Yeah,
right?
it would take some capital, um, to I guess to grow on a very depends on how much you want to grow. To grow on a very commercial level where you have four or five greenhouses, yes, it would take some capitalization to get that done. And I mean, in California, the people who are participating in the legal cannabis business were often people who had money because they before it legalized they were selling illegally, so they had cash and they had the cash, they had know-how, and that's not in every case, I'm sure, but I mean people that have been growing weed, marijuana in California for years. I mean, they've been for 20 years. I mean, they got capital. They just never got caught or and sanctioned in a way that where they spent a lot of time in prison. But yes, certainly, that could be a part of a reparations deal or forgive some sort of reparations where people could be given the loan, like in California, to do one greenhouse and to get started and then move on. I think that would be more than fair for people who have been subject to incarceration due to cannabis.
Well, with tobacco, there's these giant companies, Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds, and that's probably what's going to happen eventually one day with this. But that doesn't mean there aren't small tobacco farmers, right?
Yes.
That still make a living, working with those big companies.
Yes, but primarily, from what I know about tobacco, the small farmer usually supplies, the Philip Morrises and the R.J. Reynolds and the different companies. They don't they get the tobacco. They produce the tobacco in the way that the company wants them to produce it, and uh, and they pay them a fee to grow the tobacco. So the R.J. Reynolds doesn't grow its own tobacco. I'm sure it does have farms, but they also get a lot of tobacco from small farmers all over the state. So, and that's not a bad thing, but again, people should be allowed to participate in what is the new gold rush, is what I call it. Let people make a living, let people improve themselves and build wealth. That makes us all better. When people do that, don't shut it down so that the small guy who just wants to do a mom and pop type situation, let them participate as well. That's the fair thing to do.
And I guess CBD is kind of a lot of small people. I mean,
Hmm.
with the CBD stores, it's just we're the only one kind of in my town I live in. And but I had a guy call me from Oklahoma, and he wanted to sell us some product for our store. And we got to talking, and he said they just legalized marijuana in Oklahoma. I don't know. I think it's medical,
Yeah.
just a few months ago. And he said he lives in a kind of a small town there. He says there are 20 dispensaries in that town now.
Hmm.
Like he said, they had a really low cost to entry, and now they're revisiting that, and they think they need to, leave some people out, make it a little, charge a little more to get a license.
Well,
It's kind of wide open, isn't it?
yes, it is. I have a military buddy. He has family in Oklahoma, and he was telling me that they just legalized, and he said they're everywhere, and it's high quality. But a lot of that is coming from other states. That's where the supply is coming from, because not that many people are growing there yet. They haven't had time to.
Yeah, that's what this guy said too. He said people from California are just coming to Oklahoma.
Yeah, they come into Oklahoma, or the product that they produced in Oklahoma in some ways, or in California, somehow arriving in Oklahoma to supply their stores. That's but I mean they should, and that's going to happen. There actually is a glut of cannabis out there that has driven the price down. And so it's not like our high school days when, you have some really top quality cannabis that doesn't really cost that much on the street. Not saying that I do, that I purchase on the street, but I know people that do. So the quality of the product, and that's because there is a glut in California and Colorado. And so what do you do with it? You can't just sit up and let it rot. So they supply stores from different states, and that's very illegal because that's a federal crime because that's crossing state lines. And I'm not sure about how they're doing it. I don't know, but that's the element that should be taken out, the illegality. If I produce a high quality sativa here in North Carolina, I should be able to sell it to anybody in the United States, and it's not like that. It's a serious federal crime to cross state lines with drugs now, or what they consider drugs.
What else? What did we leave out? What are we missing? We've got a couple minutes here.
Well, I mean, I think the topic was how to create equity, or why black and brown people are sanctioned more than anybody else. And again, I go back to the hearts of people. We have to change. There should be a marketing or public relations type campaigns to mitigate, you know, you know, sanctioning black people more than other people just for something that most people do or a lot of people do. And I don't know exactly, I don't know what methodology we would have to do to or put in place to facilitate mitigating that, but we need to do it, and we need to make the cannabis industry more fair and more inclusive, so that we all can prosper from it, um, and make our country better. That's what I see.
Mm.
That's what I think would be the best thing for the nation. To go ahead and do what Europe or a lot of different other countries have done and legalize it, so that people can make a living doing that if that's what they want to do.
Well, I apologize. I had no idea until I started this. I've only been in this business a short time, but we have customers of a diverse group of customers, and they have a different way of looking at it. Like, we put,
Mhm.
like, if they buy the hemp, we put it in a bag and we give them a lot of documentation. Like, this will
Mhm.
protect you if you get stopped. And different ages, different races have a different response to that. Most white people say, "I don't
Mhm.
need that. I can just, I'll talk my way out. Don't worry about it." And some people are like, "Thank you very much. I really appreciate that documentation." So I apologize for being totally unaware most all my life, and I'm sure many other white people are exactly the same as I am. But Lee, I want to thank you so much for being our guest here. It's great to see you too. Uh, it's been a while.
Hey, good to
It's been a
see
while.
you. Well, I hope that I've been helpful, because I do. I'm a serious proponent of cannabis legalization around the nation. But thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure to be here with you, Sam.
Well, thank you, Lee, and my best to Diane, your wife, who's also a great friend of mine. Thanks for being here, Lee.
All righty, you take care.
PhenomWell is produced by Mo Barrow and is part of the Press Play Podcast Network, which empowers hosts to create high-quality podcasts that inspire and entertain. For more information, email content@pressplaypodcasts.com.